what we need to teach people isn't necessarily what the magic frequency is, but what the magic to music is.
Welcome to the Production Masters Podcast, the philosophies and techniques behind making music according to the masters of music production. Hey everybody, welcome back to another Production Masters Podcast. Today was my interview with the awesome mastering engineer Alan Douches, who's done everything from Killswitch Engage to Converge to Motorhead to you just name it, he's done it. And he's a guy that is so incredibly passionate about what he does. He's so deeply committed to what he does. He's a master in the technical aspect as well as just having something beyond the technical. He's engaged on a personal level. He listens with a musical ear and he's the great combination of technical and musical, which is what a really great mastering engineer needs to be, I think. He gave up a great amount of his time and was really enthusiastic about a lot of the things we talked about. We really agreed on so many things to do with the way modern music has become glued too much to the grid and the way that excessive processing has really worked against the musicality of songs that are being produced now. We really agreed on so many things, like if we really understand digital and we embrace it, that we can walk forward into a better sounding era of music. It was just such a great conversation, full of so many golden nuggets that, in fact, Alan and I are planning to do another interview where we dig in even further into the technical aspects of what will allow people to make the most musical recordings and what will allow them to keep the technical pitfalls out of the way. So I really look forward to that one. And also, guys, if you want to get in touch, if you have any questions or something to contribute to the conversation, you can email me at info@productionmasters.net. And I should also say at this point, you can also subscribe to the podcast at Stitcher Radio and, of course, at iTunes, where, once again, if you could leave me a review, that would be absolutely awesome. And one final thing, I do apologize for the audio quality of my voice during this interview. My mic actually didn't record, and Alan's actually drops out at one point as well, so we had to rely on Skype audio for some of it. But I hope that doesn't stop you enjoying it. Okay, so that's enough of me talking. This is quite a long interview, so here we go. From West Side Music, Mr. Alan Douches. All right, everyone, welcome back to another Production Masters podcast. Today, I'm absolutely honoured to have none other than Mr. Alan Douches on the line. So I'm going to say, with no further ado, g'day, and how are you this morning?
I'm pretty awesome. Thanks, Owen. Thanks for having me on.
Oh, thank you for being on. It's really cool. I've got a few questions for you, and hopefully we'll be having a good chat.
Yeah, we'll expand on them, I'm sure.
Yeah, that's right. That's usually what happens. Usually I start with what I think are going to be the questions, and then it just branches. So I'm expecting that's what will happen here.
Yes, sure.
So you've had like a really long and successful career so far, and I suppose the cream of some of the projects that you've done include Converge, Killswitch Engage, Dillinger Escape Plan, Mastodon, Motorhead, all these kind of bands. And
right.
So you're obviously one of the big important guys in that universe, and have established yourself as one of the important mastering guys in general, I think. So, but let's go right back to, when did your audio career start? And I want to expand on that. Like, why did and why did you get into mastering? So let's tackle those questions.
Yeah, I got started in audio, as most of us do as a musician, wanting to make my own songs and doing it at home, and then realizing, well, this isn't really sounding awesome, so maybe I should seek out the local studio, and kind of did that. They offered me an assistant's job or an intern's job, and kind of worked on that for a couple of months. Then I just kind of lucked out, and there was a very famous producer, Jack Douglas, who came to the studio and booked about 3 months straight. And as it turns out, due to circumstances, we took a liking to each other, or he took a liking to me, and said, you know what, I want Alan to be my assistant. So at a very young age, I think I was 19 at the time, I just basically jumped right into, major, record production. Jack had just won the Grammy Award for Double Fantasy album. So, I was kind of thrust into like state-of-the-art, record production. From there, then obviously my engineering career just started to take off a bit because I had worked with, some renowned people. And worked with a lot of R&B people, some early rap people, Grandmaster Flash and Ray Goodman and Brown in R&B and stuff. And then I started gravitating into more of the indie world. I just seemed to find more fun. I was making about the same amount of money, no matter whom I was working with, and I gravitated into the indie world.
So, which era what sort of era are we talking about there?
Mid 80s, I guess.
Oh, yeah. Wow, right back that far. Okay. Yeah, sure.
Yeah, mid 84, 85, something like that. Then being in the indie world in the mid to late 80s into the early 90s, there really was no indie mastering. Indie mastering was kind of an unknown quantity. You basically just sent your masters off, and you got back either a CD or a vinyl record or something, and you kind of hoped that it sounded something like what you sent in. And that obviously wasn't always the case. So that's when I kind of took things into my own hands. I had been to many mastering sessions, and I had a few good friends who were mastering engineers that had worked on records that I had mixed, etc. And I just started working on my mastering because I was working for these indie labels who had no money to really do proper mastering. And so they invited me to say, hey, listen, if you want to do this for us, we'd be thrilled. And this was, I guess, like 92, 93, something like that. And I was like, great, if you're going to pay me, this is awesome. And that's when it just really started to take off. It was really like I was somebody that was caring about indie music and trying to do the best job I could in getting it into those final resting places, whatever media format that was.
So you must have had some sort of an interest to want to go into that, though, because presumably if you were dead set on just doing production and mixing, you would have said, look, maybe send it to a mastering studio. So you must have had some interest in wanting to go down that road, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I was intrigued by it, but it was also, a situation, a job situation. It was just like, okay, and especially back then, and I think even today, engineers, we're just all taught to say yes. Hey, would you like to? Yes, I will.
Yeah.
Would you like to record this? Yes. You don't say no.
Yeah.
So I said yes, and it turned out. That I started to I think rather than having an interest in it, I started to enjoy it. I really enjoyed helping more indie bands, get their product out. So
what was your mastering process like at that stage? What would it have entailed then to get the finished product?
Yeah, I had my own analog half-inch and quarter-inch machine, but a lot of these early indie records were recording to DAT tapes. So we were playing back from a DAT tape, going through analog processing. At the time, I believe it was probably just a Massenburg EQ and a few different kinds of compressors that I had. I had a really, accurate monitoring environment. And then there was an early sound designer system. I don't even think it wasn't even called Pro Tools at the time. It was just, like an editing system.
That was SD2, I think, was it? Just a stereo editor?
Yeah, SD2, yeah. And basically just preparing, new digital masters for replication. So it was basic, but at least it was better than, especially in the heavy music world, it was better than some guy at the pressing plant, just like hitting play and just letting it rip. So I started gaining a reputation that, wow, this guy actually likes heavy music. He knows what to do with it, and let's send it to him.
So what were some of those earliest heavy releases that you worked on? What were some of the earlier ones that you worked on?
It was a lot of the Lower East Side hardcore bands from New York, Crown of Thorns, Murphy's Law, Leeway, just a lot of early early hardcore stuff that really no one wanted to do. I was working with a couple of labels, Another Planet, which wound up becoming Triple Crown later. Caroline Records was a big label that I used to work for. I actually was producing a couple of records for them prior to mastering, and they were distributing about 500 pieces of product a year. So they were sending me about a third of their work at that time. So they were a big client of mine, and you know, it just turned out that because of location and my friendship with them, that just blossomed. And there were, like I said, a lot of those early bands. I think I did a Bad Brains record that they distributed. Oh my gosh, Revelation Records, early Century Media stuff, Victory Records, early stuff. Thursday, Taking Back Sunday? I think I might have done their first record.
Yeah.
So yeah, crazy.
And so when did West Side music come into the picture?
That was just about at that time. We were in Manhattan for a very short period of time, but then found that it was just too cost prohibitive to stay there, and so we moved to a town right outside of New York called West New York, and so we just kind of made a pun about it, calling it West Side music, and not thinking that it was going to stick, just thinking like, all right, this is like we'll call it this because it's kind of funny. But as it turned out, it you know, whatever it is now, 13,000 albums later, you know, you can't go back and change your name.
Yeah.
So,
yeah, that's pretty impressive.
I think a lot of people, you know, even band names, you know, bands come up with names and they have a name and then they're not perhaps serious about it, but it sticks. I don't think that anybody should belabor over that, but it's just a name. But that's just what happened, and it became kind of ubiquitous with this indie mastering that we were doing, and so we kept it. We just kept going with it.
For sure, it's definitely the same thing that happens with bands. Even some bands that have not even the greatest names, that eventually it just the name becomes synonymous with the music instead of whether it's actually the world's greatest name. You know, so.
Right. Yeah.
Which is, I'm not saying anything about your mastering studio name, but you know what I'm saying.
No, it became a joke, you know, and how many West, you know, and as it turned out, it just stuck, and it wasn't intentional, and we just decided to keep going with it because we had accumulated credits. And it didn't matter to me. You know, the name really means nothing. So it's really more about, you know, the product that we were putting out. And that's what we stood by, obviously.
Absolutely. So I wanted to talk to you about, with musicality in general, is there something that you hear consistently nowadays with the mixes that you're putting up to listen to now? Is there something that you're consistently hearing that's coming in that is working against the musicality of the music?
Yeah, of course. Over processing, you know.
Yeah. Which is, necessarily just mean dynamics processing, though, right?
I mean everything. You know, everything is just because you can, you do. You know, and rather than going to the source and altering a source, you know, it's just so much easier to just, you know, grab an EQ, put another EQ on, put another compressor, put a limiter, put a multiband on. You know, some artists send us their whole hard drives, you know, thinking that, you know, we may want to pop open their mix to, you know, to adjust it to make it the best it could be. And sometimes we do that, but as you pop the mix open, you just look at, you know, every track has a multiband compressor, as well as going through some parallel chain, as well as something else. And, you know, and I always try to, you know, say to people, you know, remember that a lot of the records that we really loved and love the way they sound were done in minimalist form, in a sense, to today's standards, you know, multi-track, 24-track.
Yeah.
An average, you know, indie multi-track room in the 90s, you know, maybe had 10 compressors. And if you were going to put one on a stereo bus, that left you with 8, and then you had to kind of figure out what's going to get some compression. Well, lead vocal needs a little bit more. Well, background vocals, got to tuck those in. Lead guitar, there's 4. Now you got 2 on your bus, is 6. Now you got 4 left. Well, maybe kick and snare. Okay, now you only got 2 left. Nowadays, because you can compress everything, you get these mixes that are just completely static. There's no dynamic within the arrangement. And it's just because people are lazy. I feel that, my first rule of thumb is use a fader before an EQ, and then use an EQ before a compressor. That should be the way that you should be mixing. Like the first thing you should do if something isn't fitting in the mix is adjust the fader. If that's not truly solving the problem, then EQ. But it seems like everybody reaches for some form of compression first. And that just takes all of that dynamic away from the music. And it's a shame because digital audio, that's the thing that it has to shine. It was the dynamics. But we're just squashing the hell out of it.
Yeah, because there's an abundance of clean dynamic range possible. Just so much possibility, isn't there?
Oh, it's amazing. It's what we would have died to have this kind of dynamic range, back in the 70s or the 80s or something, or even in the 90s when digital was young. We were taught, to put it in as hot and as powerful as possible so you get the best signal to noise ratio. But even that signal to noise ratio at 96 dB was far better than any half-inch machine or quarter-inch machine, that was available. So, but we weren't really taking advantage of the air and the headroom that kind of you can have in digital. And I constantly see it with guys that mix well below 0, 10 dB, 12 dB, peaks below 0, that their mixes just sound a lot more open,
Yeah, and because it's complicated, obviously, understanding the true architecture of digital audio and the way it all works, there's been such a mixture of different people's opinions about how hot you have to ram things into digital to get the highest fidelity and how bit depth really works and all these kinds of things. So it seems to have taken a while for people to connect the dots on a few of these issues with digital, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and it's also, I think we're just coming out of, the learning curve with digital. I think now we're at a point where we're like truly starting to understand it. And there are guys that are doing truly great work in digital. Although, my working environment, has, the best of digital and the best of analog, I'm not anti-digital and pro analog. I use what tool is right for the job. And there truly are some great digital tools, but more often than not, they're kind of repairing tools. I think we're still missing a little bit of the true color. And part of that has to do with what I've been recently calling the grid, just that the grid concept, that there's only there's a finite number of places, either harmonically or dynamically, that a waveform can fall within a digital medium. That, when you're combining things within a mixing environment and everything is constrained to that grid, it's tough to get that air or that extra harmonic, the microharmonics, the microdynamic stuff that analog catches. It's hard to capture that and mix that within that environment. And that's where I feel that we're missing, a lot of ambience and width and depth of field in digital recording. That, I think, is the next barrier that we're going to be trying to be jumped past.
Right. So, but that's more a symptom of digital doing entirely digital processing more so than it is actual digital recording, right?
Right. Yes. I mean, I think there's a record that I mastered. I did quite a few records for Sufjan Stevens, but one of his records is Illinois record. He's kind of like an anti-folk or kind of an alternative artist, and the record wound up selling 500,000 copies, but it was recorded inside and mixed inside a Digio 1, a 16-bit 24-track mixing environment. But he didn't use, because he didn't use a ton of plugins. most of the time, his processing was done externally. If he didn't like the sound of something, he re-recorded it, re-mic'd it, or took it out of digital and brought it back into, at the analog world, messed with it and then put it back into digital, and just kind of let that digital environment mix the audio. And it's, again, so it's sold over 500,000 copies. It's pretty renowned in the world of indie music, and he, does a tremendous sounding record.
Yeah, I think there's a definite lesson in that with minimal processing. The more you're smashing with the mix bus, the more plugins that are all stacking, and the more calculations that the mix bus is doing, the more you're sort of starting to turn it to unfocused sort of digital garbage, aren't you?
Hash. And again, you're squeezing things onto that grid. You're missing other little areas where things can be recombined. And I think a lot of the algorithms that are being used for EQs and compression, they're very similar. So even though each particular plugin may sound a little bit different, they're still behaving very much in similar ways. So we're getting similar processing on top of similar processing, and then it just starts to sound the same. And that's also a product of not necessarily just the volume wars, but just of all this hyper compression that people are doing, rather than moving a fader, rather than automating a mix. They're squeezing things down so that the waveforms are actually starting to look similar, because they're starting to become square waves in a sense. I mean, not true square waves, but they're getting squared off. Yeah.
Yep. So I want to get to talking a little bit about the loudness war soon, but before I forget about it, do you think that the experience that you had with those bigger studios, and when there were the big budgets and all the great sounding gear and the experienced producers and engineers, did that create a reference point for you really understanding how to achieve really high quality results?
Absolutely. I've said that, my ear training into what a mix should sound like was by listening to the playback of a Studer A80 half-inch machine coming through a Neve 8038 console in a well-designed control room, Yep. And when you're doing, and I spent about 3 years engineering on that console. And when you're just, that becomes when you're early on, when you're defining who and what sounds matter to you. Not when I was 19, 20, 21. When you're doing that, that's what gets ingrained into you. So yeah, that's what I hear automatically while I'm working. That's where I'm heading towards. We have an analog mixing room here that has a Sony MXP 3036 console, and although we don't really rent it out or hire it out for bands to work in, it's really more of a working environment for us to do 2-inch transfers and do other production work that we do here. I often invite engineers to come up and just listen, put on a piece of 2-inch tape, try and mix in analog, just see what it sounds like. And no charge, kind of for free. Just come on by. Bring, if you have a tape, or I'll put a tape. We have hundreds of 2-inch tapes that nobody wants back. Put up a tape and see what that sounds like. Most of the time they're enlightened, and they're like, oh my God, it sounds so real. And one of the kickers is that they say is it's so much easier to mix and fun to mix, which is interesting. But then, you get them, even though the console is automated, it's only faders and mutes, then you start to see people get frustrated with that because they want to fall back to the power of the automation that's available in today's DAW systems. It's, between sends and, pans and all the automation functions, all the parameters within all the plugins to be able to vary and automate that it's just mind-boggling.
Of course. So what kind of monitoring do you have in that room, out of curiosity?
In my room here now, or in the analog room?
Yeah, the analog room.
We're using, actually, we have a variety of speakers, NS10s, of course, KRK 703 monitors. We have a set of Tannoy biradial or concentric speakers. I believe there's a set of small B&W bookshelf speakers. I think they're called CD 101s or 10s or something like that. Yeah, we have a variety of things and oratones, and we kind of teach people to mix in mono on one speaker, like, hey, get some balances that way. And then there's that whole tactile, large format analog console that allows you to do so many things. And a lot of workstations, with tying in with their interfaces, and they kind of have some controls, like they'll have a monitor controller, maybe they'll have a mono button or something. But there's something about having, a lot of control in your monitoring environment between switching to different pairs of speakers, switching to mono, switching one speaker off, listening to the other speaker. That's really important to mixing, that I feel a lot of people are missing still.
Yeah, certainly the majority of people who are mixing their own music, and I mean, presumably a lot of people who are becoming the next generation of engineers haven't had that experience of hearing music like that.
Yeah, and it's a shame, because you really should experience it in some capacity to learn about it. I mean, a lot of people do that now. They'll go to a studio to track, and then they'll go do all their overdubs on their own or something, and then maybe go back to the studio to mix.
Yeah.
It's a very competitive world. Obviously, everybody can record, so you've got to look at how serious are you about this, and what do you want to make this record sound like. I'm sure we will talk about the volume wars, but also, higher resolution is making a big comeback via vinyl and sites like hdtracks.com and Tidal, where, you can hear and download higher resolution music. And it's amazing to see kids, really hearing vinyl, and what is it that they're hearing that they're intrigued by and, in a sense, endeared to. And there's a lot to be said about that quality that they're missing.
I feel good about that, but even if it's just the fact that things seem to have forked away from the world of MP3s at least a bit now. It feels like there's some hope for things going back towards some better quality than that.
Yeah, absolutely.
I guess as the bandwidth of the internet opens up more, and technology permits the distribution of better quality digital. And
it's also a listenability factor. You're more likely to listen to something for a longer period of time if it has certain qualities that are pleasing to you. So if you're listening to something hashy and aggressive, although, we do plenty of aggressive music that sounds awesome, and it has dynamics, and it has, full frequency spectrum information, and it's not a constant full frequency spectrum. It's in, it's out, it moves around. That kind of play to your ear makes it more listenable over a longer period of time. And I think we're finding that with vinyl, with higher dynamic range stuff, that people are listening to an album longer or something, rather than if it were just MP3s in a playlist. People are so used to skipping around and just, I'm bored of this, I'm bored of this, I'm bored of this, I'm bored of this, I'm bored of this. Whereas when they get into some higher quality audio, they're acknowledging it, and they're saying, you know what, I like this. We just did it with Mastodon, with their Leviathan album. It's coming out on hdtracks.com because they're selling on HD Tracks. There is a need. I think they were the number 4 seller a few weeks ago on this site. I don't know if you're aware of it, but they sell.
I'm aware of HD Tracks, but I sort of assumed actually that it was maybe like a curiosity that no one knows about that exists sort of in the background somewhere. But
well, I think it's changed. From what we've seen, like I said. We're finding artists that you maybe wouldn't have thought would have been there. You may have thought of it more of as a highbrow jazz or classical, kind of world. And it's true, that's probably those are their big selling items. But now a lot of rock acts, a lot of artists want to make sure that their stuff comes out on high quality, and so we're digging back into some of those masters, and we're releasing high definition stuff.
You're right. So with the Mastodon one, was that do you know if it was that recorded analog and then
yes,
was it?
Yeah, it was recorded analog 2-inch at Traxxas in South River, New Jersey.
And then mastered to a high resolution digital.
It was mastered to 24-bit at the time. I think it was 44. For the high resolution, we did do an upsample through the analog world to 96 from the original mixes. So so it does get a little bit more quality about it.
So you didn't do the original stereo master?
No, yeah, I did the original stereo master, but it was at 44. We also actually did that album in surround. Eric Rachel, the mixing engineer, and myself mixed a part of the album in surround.
That's another thing I was going to ask you about the. Actually, it's all these things, so I might as well just talk about it now. I was going to ask you about the future of 5.1 as well, if you had an opinion about that.
I think it will come in strong at some point again. It will never replace, perhaps a stereo stream or something. But again, as bandwidth gets faster, it's already a standard in the broadcast world. Pretty much any show on digital television gets broadcast with a 5.1 feed. It's whether or not the production team chooses to utilize it or not. All of the flags and all the decoding is in place. So it's really now just a matter of the artists, while they're mixing, to be able to say, you know what, we're mixing in stereo, but you know what, once we're done, let's just also do a surround mix of this. And the gaming world is very much into it. So when bands are looking for these alternative ways of making a little bit of income, whereas it used to be a placement in a movie or something to make, $1,200, or maybe a band got lucky and got a song in a major, motion picture or something and made $30,000 or something like that. Now I think they should be thinking about surround and thinking like, all right, well, movies, broadcast, they want that stuff. If you're watching TV and if you have a surround sound hooked up to your television and a commercial comes on and it's got surround audio rather than stereo, you take notice, because it's suddenly, an enveloping, sound field. And you go, wow, what's different about this? And you're drawn to paying attention to it.
Oh, look, I think that music, just purely music represented in 5.1, if it's all done properly, I think it's an amazing experience.
Oh, yeah.
Like, I don't think there's any doubt about that. I think it's just, I don't really have enough of an idea about where it's popular or how it's working out in the world now as a format. I know there's bands that do it, but, I guess there must still be a market for it, but it really would be great if it did open up more.
Yeah, we used to tell people, I haven't said it in a while, but, while you're tracking, especially if you're tracking in a DAW situation, where you kind of have unlimited tracks, while you're doing your basic tracks, just throw up some extra microphones, throw up some extra room mics. Just, maybe they don't fit with the sound for your stereo field or what you're going for, or maybe you want a tighter drum sound or something. But, just throw up some mics and record them to have them for the surround. When you're doing your basic rhythm tracks, guitar tracks, maybe just throw up another, amp or another mic or something and just record it and have it on another track to have as for the surround mix. Because, when you get to mixing in surround, and if what you think it's about is just adding surround reverb to everything, you wind up with a giant wash of a mix. It's almost like reverb is almost less effective in surround for placement than it is in the stereo field. You really want more choices, more phasing choices, more distant microphones to be able to place things within that sound field.
Right. So you need to make use of space more so than filling it up then.
Yeah, and again, thinking ahead, you have to be thinking while you're tracking, like, okay, you know what, let me just put up a couple extra mics, and just to have them. And again, and I think it will happen, again, because we're going to be looking, bands, artists, record labels are looking for more revenue streams to make that 360 come together to enough so the band can afford to stay alive.
Yeah,
so
totally.
Why not have, if you went to an indie movie music supervisor, and if they kind of liked your music and they kind of liked somebody else's music, but that other person's music was mixed in surround, they had instrumentals in surround, that's going to win out. And again, it's not like you have to re-record the album in surround. It's not like you have to completely remix it. You can take your stereo mix and then just convert it to a surround mix and then adjust from it. It will take obviously extra time, but I think it's going to be worth it. I think you're going to start seeing bands looking for that alternative revenue stream, and the gaming world, the television marketplace, et cetera, where the infrastructure for that audio is already in place. It's there. It's not like, and that's what I think the big barrier was when surround first started coming out, was you had to have a whole setup for it,
Yeah.
and you had to really know how to set it up. Now there's enough of the metadata and the handshakes that go on to recognize what kind of signal is coming on, how many speakers do you have set up, that it will automatically kind of, tune that 5.1 for your situation.
Cool. Yeah, I think it's a great idea. So the vinyl resurgence, there's been, I think, as it's come along, some people have been cynical about it, saying it's only a bit of a joke, or it's not really going to make much of a difference and all that sort of thing. But it still seems to be, as far as I can tell, going fairly strong, and it's gaining interest and a lot of sort of love along the way. So what's your perception of that?
It's amazing. It's wonderful and amazing. And I account most of it not as much, although it can sound amazing and often will sound amazing. It's not always the sound that first attracts people to it. It's the tactile. It's holding a big piece of artwork. It's purchasing something that you feel it will have worth. So, we have bands here all the time that, like they're not pressing CDs because they can't sell a CD at a gig for $5, but they can sell the vinyl for $20, you know? And so when a band is making a choice as to what merch they're going to take on the road and what to sell, although the vinyl is a larger piece of merch and it's harder to take on the road, they're finding that that's what people are purchasing. And again, it comes down to this very, very, user interactive playback, where you have to do more than just hit a button. You have to take the record out of the jacket, take it out of the sleeve, don't touch it, be careful with it, and it's interactive. Do you play the A side or the B side first? Do you play cut one? And you're more likely to let 5 songs go by and listen to an album. It just happened with my daughter. She was listening to an album, and she had never heard a song before, even though she had the digital version, or it's certainly available. And she said, I've never heard that song. But it was only because she had let it roll on the side of vinyl that she discovered that song. And then you become more endeared to the artist, because you're not just hearing either the hit or the single or the whatever that now you're tired of, but you're hearing 5 songs or 6 songs. You're hearing a bit of a stretch. I've always said this. A lot of people pose out a question like, well, if a band has X amount of budget, what should they do? Should they record 1 song really well, or should they record, 5 songs, kind of well, or should they record 10 songs, not so well? Well, yeah. I'd probably say something like 5 or 6 songs kind of well, rather than concentrating on the 1 song. You got to show depth. You've got to show who you are as an artist. And I think that's what's happening with people now, is that they're buying the vinyl, and there's a question as to whether or not people are actually playing it. They are buying it as merch, as a product that they're holding on to.
Yeah.
It's exciting to purchase something like this from a band. But when people do actually listen to it, they really do get into the artist. They're reading lyrics, they're reading jackets. Plus, all of those.
Yeah, I was saying, and plus you can't have it in your earbuds when you're like going for a jog. You actually have to be sitting in the room with it, listening to it.
Right. And it seems like it's a lot easier. Like, you can be on the phone and let the music play. You can text and whereas I think when it's on, or, your portable device and you're streaming it, like you say, with earbuds or something, if you get interrupted by a phone call or a message or something, you're less likely to be paying attention to the music. Whereas when it's on vinyl, it's playing in the background, you're still loving it. There's a whole lot of that kind of, non-technical stuff, non-musical stuff that is why people are loving the playback of vinyl. I mean, it could be a CD if the CD experience of playing something was more enjoyable, but it's just not, And then we could talk about what actually is the sound quality difference, which is
that's an
pretty awesome
one
as well.
Yeah.
Well, because, so often, we're cutting the lacquers from, at least a 24-bit source, very often not as dynamically squashed of a source, and in many cases 96K. Where we're taking a much higher resolution master and putting it into the lacquer so that it can transcend, to the end listener if their system can hear that back. So they are getting a better quality of audio. They're getting a better playback experience. They're getting merch that they want to hold on to. It's an amazing win for the industry right now.
And so do you sort of predict that it has a future going into the future? Like, you think that will continue? I don't see why it shouldn't, because humans are still going to have ears and eyes, and they're going to love music. So, there's no reason why it has to go away just because you can.
Yeah, I suppose there's a lot of discussion about, is it going to last? I think I heard somebody at Sony talking about they're predicting 10 years for vinyl before it wears itself out again. 10 years right now would be awesome. That might just afford us to get to a different format, or something.
Were they saying that was a problem? You would think that would be good, because then they can sell you another new copy.
Right, well, yeah, in Sony's inevitable way, yeah, I'm sure that's what they're thinking.
But if you really look after vinyl, though, if you really properly look after it, it should last more than 10 years, though, shouldn't it?
Oh, it will last a lifetime. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Matter of fact, it's kind of almost the most durable format we have. Tapes are great, but they absorb moisture, and we have to bake them to transfer them. There's half-life of the magnetic field, so tapes don't last that long, which is an interesting thing for a lot of people. It's like if you have your analog source tapes, you may want to get them transferred to a high-resolution digital format at some point, because they're not going to last. Every moment that they sit, they are degrading. It's far less degrading than digital, which is catastrophic. We're now obviously seeing CDs with severe dropouts that just because of the light sources and stuff that we're seeing that format is not what they projected it to be, and that digital can be devastating. When it drops out hard. When analog tape has a dropout, it's a little soft, and with vinyl, we have inherent problems of surface noise and things like that. But if you take the care and you do it properly, it can sound amazing, and will sound amazing, and it will last a lifetime.
And on the CD, do you have any personal opinion or prediction about what the future of the CD will be? I know the overall general vibe and opinion is that it is slowly dying a death, and I think someone told me that Sony actually set a date after which they're no longer going to even press CDs. But
right. Yeah, I guess at the moment, it's what I've been recommending to especially indie bands is to just do limited CDR runs. That it's still worth having 50 or 100 of them. If you're selling them at a gig, have a few, because there's always going to be somebody. But certainly to press 5,000 CDs or something like that, that's not really a smart move. So. Yeah. Its death is inevitable because it's just digital. It doesn't offer anything more than you can get from a download. As a matter of fact, a full resolution 16-bit 44.1 sample rate WAV file that you download is better quality than what you're going to get on a CD, because the CD uses a Reed-Solomon correction curve. There are inherent errors in the tracking and the playback of digital audio. It happens no matter what you try to do.
Yep.
We try to minimize it. We measure those factors, but there are dropouts. With a file transferred through the internet, you have a perfect copy of it. So the CD is inferior to what we can get from our playback devices, and I've seen that a lot in the hi-fi market, where guys have hard drives and they have playback mechanisms, and they'll download high resolution and also 1644.1, and that's what they're playing. Nobody's really buying CDs. The artwork's too small. It's plastic. It's not healthy to our environment. There's so many things that are against it right now, that the death is inevitable. But at the moment, I still think it's a format that a band needs to have in case somebody. I was at the Warp Festival last year, and met a couple of bands, and a lot of people gave me download cards. Hey, check out our music, check out this, whatever, and
Okay.
But the only music that I listened to on my car ride home were the guys that gave me CDs. So because I had a CD player in my car, so. You have to remember what's the purpose of your music. If you're selling it to your fans, maybe you don't need CDs. But if you're shopping it and you want industry people to hear it, you should have CDs available as a format for somebody to hear. But again, just pressing. There's an interesting concept of just getting blank CDRs printed up with your artwork on it, and literally just recording on a laptop or something, however many CDs you need. So and if you wanted to change the order, if you wanted to change the songs on it, you could. I've seen many bands do that as they're literally going on the road. They're just pressing them in the back of their van, in a sense. I mean, they're getting the artwork pressed on the disc. It's a blank CDR with the artwork on it.
Yeah.
And then just put whichever music you feel is appropriate on it at that time.
Yeah, right. Okay.
But now cassettes, are coming back.
Yeah,
I don't know.
I honestly, I came through when cassettes were still what am I saying? I came into listening to music. Vinyl had just sort of disappeared, and then everything was cassettes, and I started to buy CDs when they were still a bit new and a bit expensive, and then. What the point I'm getting to is, I will never be sorry to see the arse end of cassette tapes. Basically, I think that's one format. It can go into the dustbin of history. You know what I mean? That's fine with me.
But I think it has that same lure, of that kids. It's like you have to listen through it. Fast forward and rewinding is a little clumsy, So it's kind of this thing that maybe your parents can't play it. You don't know what it is. It's cool. It's indie. It's a very one-off kind of format. You feel special about it. I agree. From a technical standpoint, it's just a nightmare. But there is this whole: how do you get people to enjoy music? What playback mechanism can you put your music on that will make people enjoy your music? That's why I think we're at this point with vinyl and with cassettes on a comeback. We've done a couple of 8-tracks for of strange reasons, just because it seemed like there was a short run that was maybe about a dozen or 14 albums in the course of maybe about a year or two, where for some reason some distributor was pushing 8-track tapes,
And who's got a player? Is there some old sort of 70s Cadillacs people are driving that have still got the players?
Yeah, you know what? We were finding South American hardcore bands. Yeah, because right? Apparently all of these old 70s vehicles that the United States didn't want anymore wound up going down to South America or something, and people had 8-track players in their cars.
Yeah, wow.
Again, how do you get people to enjoy your music? That's what bands have to look towards, And so, if you're going to get stuck on one format when your audience may want something else, then you're cutting yourself short. So,
yeah, good point.
I'm not embracing 8-tracks at all.
Yeah, and I don't think there'll be an 8-track resurgence. I don't see it as the future of music delivery in general. But
no. Let's stay out of that one.
And in the same way, I don't know if anyone thought it was going to happen, but obviously optical media, going as far as Blu-ray, I don't see is ever going to probably end up being a delivery format either, is it really? I mean, it's going to be more the HD tracks download that'll provide, the access to the higher resolution audio in the end, I think.
Right. Yeah. I mean, and people would, if you can stream it, why store it? If you can somehow be attached to a license on it, if that's the case, then yeah, I'd rather not have a stack of plastic to have to search for something. Certainly that vinyl record that if I really love an album and I love an artist, I want to have that vinyl playback. But if it comes to just a digital source, Blu-ray is the same as a DVD, which is the same as a CD. It's just digital information, which can be streamed at a better quality as far as no loss is concerned from the internet. So it will be replaced. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. All right, so let's talk a little bit about the loudness war, since you are a mastering engineer and you're the right person to be talking to about it. But maybe let's take it from the angle of, have you noticed a change in what you've been able to put out there now as a master that people are going to be happy with, or is there a difference in what people are wanting and asking for now in regard to loudness and all that stuff?
Yeah, absolutely there is. I mean, there's a little bit of a education that still has to take place with the artists. A lot of people are still, referring back to albums that they loved from 4, 5, 6, 7 years ago when, we were at the height of the volume wars. So, and they want their records to have that same sound. But if we educate them as to, well, wait a second, but listen to this new record or listen to this new record and see what's happening. We still like what loudness does in terms of just bulk of sound. The presentation of a thick and full sounding frequency spectrum. We still love that, and that still works. The task now is to how do we keep that, but yet not get that fatiguing, overdone, crispy, limited version. All of the internet sources, are dropping their playback volumes, and they're having algorithms in play to make that work. But certainly just taking the limiters off or the compressors off isn't really doing it, because although maybe your transients will be louder than the other bands, your music doesn't sound as full. So yeah, the overall loudness war is kind of over, but we still, as listeners, enjoy that thing that we call compression, and when that's done properly. Again, so when we were talking earlier about, in our workstations, that how the main culprit of what's going on that's wrong is just that everybody's over compressing stuff. Again, they're hooking up a compressor rather than moving a fader. They're using some kind of, I won't mention names, but some kind of plug-in that will ride the fader for them instead of them actually doing that. There's all of this automatic level control on stuff that's just taking all that dynamic away. That's just killing it, and that's kind of not making where we're going fun. You want music to have dynamics. You want it to have, high points and low points. And when we can still have those high points be loud, also though they may not be squashed like they were, it's still exciting. We still love that sound and that thrill of something being thick and full and rich. So it's more of a challenge now. Yes, we've dropped it down. I'd clearly say that, left to my own liking or demise, we've probably come down at least 1.5 dB, maybe 2 dB from where we were just a few years ago.
Yeah.
And even with that, we will often offer and discuss with artists these alternative formats, mastered for iTunes, vinyl, HD tracks, that kind of stuff, where the audience may be looking for something even more dynamic than what we would call our streaming master.
Yeah, so that's roughly where you find the aesthetic sweet spot is, between having the right balance of fatness and transients versus
yes,
that's where you've personally, your instinct and emotion or whatever it is when you're doing that processing, that's about where you feel like it sits. Yeah.
And we get a lot of, obviously that's, especially in loud music markets, or even in alternative markets, that's kind of where we pride ourselves in being able to, deliver a full, rich, thick sound, but to have the air and to have dynamics. And, and that, we do use, compression. We do use, some kind of limiting perhaps in the chain at some point, but it's not always a brick wall limiter at the end of the chain that we're utilizing like we were 2 or 3 or 4 years ago, or clipping per se. It's like you still want to get that sound to be full and rich so that when, it's playing, you feel enveloped with that sound. And that's the challenge. And people have said it all the time. They say, well, you're able to get it to sound really thick and loud, sounding loud, but it not feeling squashed. And I think that's what you want out of your master.
For sure. Does that mean that with some vinyl masters that you make, are they ever aesthetically maybe not quite as compressed as you might want them to be then, or?
It is a choice, absolutely, and like I say, it's discussed most of the time with the artist. That listen, we're going to a medium, we're going to a format where we can take advantage of a little bit more dynamic range, and that, quite frankly, a little more dynamic range actually sounds better when the lacquer can absorb a little bit of that transient. That's good, because if you don't give it transients to absorb, it's going to just absorb everything, and you're going to have a very flat sounding record. So you have to give a little bit of something that it's going to take away. So you want to give it a little bit of extra transient here or there. But that comes with complications. You need to make sure the mono is summed properly so you get a solid place for the low frequency to reside. You got to make sure the phasing is right. You don't want things too panned out too hard sometimes. I mean, we wouldn't necessarily adjust a panning of an instrument, but we will adjust how that center of the body of the information is presented coming back off of vinyl.
Yeah. With mastered for iTunes, that doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be a more dynamic master, does it, either?
It doesn't, but it very often can be, and will sound better. We just had somebody, A/B their material with some other stuff, and when they were just listening to it, in I think it must have been Pro Tools, when they imported their files with some other record, they were like, wow, it's not quite as loud as these other records, whatever the records they were comparing to. And I was just like, well, you remember, this is the streaming master. That's what we're going for first. Let's, did you check it in iTunes, and put on, sound check, they actually went as far as to make up their own YouTube page, private YouTube page, and put it up on YouTube and hear how, although that takes a couple of days to take effect, it doesn't immediately happen. But they put it up on YouTube and listened to how their music sounded on YouTube compared to other music. And if you do give it a little bit of dynamic, you can get it to sound a little bit louder in the long run. So yeah, mastered for iTunes is a wonderful format. It really wasn't Apple's ploy. It came from a couple of people within the music business too, approaching Apple to say, let's see if we can make a better sounding format for the end user. And Apple wants 2496, and they're storing 2496 files so that as streaming and bandwidth increases, they will be able to play back higher resolution files. When I was on the phone once a couple of years ago with one of their engineers, their concept is that that you should be able to be streaming music, and it should be able to switch formats based around how much bandwidth you have. So if you're in a low bandwidth area, it may stream the AAC file or the M4A file. But as you enter a higher bandwidth area, it will automatically sync and switch over to a higher bandwidth file format so that you can appreciate it.
Yep.
Yeah, the technology is there. It's really just up to, the bandwidth. So
yeah. I think you guys have got much better internet than us over there. They're sort of in the process supposedly of overhauling the internet here, but it's pretty garbage.
Okay.
And we get absolutely pay through the nose for downloading here as well. Like for how many gigabytes a month we've got, like it's pretty. We got some catching up to do down here.
Huh. Well, it's funny because I did notice that a lot of the, we work with quite a few Australian artists.
Yeah.
That a lot of them still are doing CDs. Whereas I think in the United States they're not. Maybe that we're looking more as a streaming format and or a vinyl format. But yeah, that's only going to get better in time, and hopefully it won't be as cost prohibitive for people to get it at this next generation.
Oh yeah, look, I'm sure it's in the pipeline. It's inevitable. I mean, the internet's not going to go away. It's only going to have to. People will figure it out eventually, I guess. So.
Right. Sure.
Yeah. So I've got a few other sort of oddball questions I came up with for you. So
go right ahead.
Do you remember the fastest mastering job you've ever done?
Speed mastering. Working with a lot of indie labels, a lot of indie artists, they are very budget conscious. And yeah, I mean, I don't know if I remember the fastest one, but there are quite a few examples of people like, just, as you're rolling up the next song, they're like, sounds great, print it, go. Yep, sounds great, yeah, great, print it. And I'm like, yeah, relax. It's not going to take that much longer for me to just hear the song through once to make sure that there's no bass drop or, or whatever, or some kind of swell that's going to happen at the end of the song. I mean, it's interesting with digital now that you can see the waveform and you can kind of look and say, oh, what's this thing at the end there? But when we were dealing with, obviously with tape, you didn't know what the end of the song was going to sound like until you got there. So you kind of had to listen through it. Actually, there've been a lot of fast mastering sessions. Yes.
That's an interesting point. So when you get files in now, like, do you pull up all the songs in a row and then do you have a quick listen through them, or do you look at them on a spectral editor, or what's your process there?
Nah, the spectral stuff doesn't. I mean, a lot of stuff is coming in pretty good spectrally. I mean, and matter of fact, I almost feel like sometimes the stuff that's more interesting is not spectrally correct because people are, just trusting their gut feelings rather than, a multi-band compressor or something like that.
Yeah, sure.
But I pull up the whole record. I want to hear, even when I do a single. Matter of fact, I'm doing something for a band, Between You and Me, I think an Australian band. And I said, do you have any other, we're doing the single first. And I was like, well, is there any other material? And they were like, yeah, well, we're working on it. I was like, just send me some MP3s. I want to hear what the rest of the album's going to sound like as well. I want to get a feel for what the album is rather than just, one song per se. But yeah, we pull up the whole record, go through a little bit of it, a little of each song, try and get an idea of, where it's going, where it's heading. So yeah, we do see things visually, just as the waveform is represented. And that's actually very helpful, although I'd rather be dealing with an analog source. We would always prefer, an analog half-inch or a quarter-inch. And actually another great format these days is DSD. There are a couple of very affordable DSD recorders on the market for about $1,000 or so, US-wise. That if you're summing in the analog world, if maybe you're recording in a DAW, but you're using an analog summing device, recording to DSD is a great option.
Right. So as opposed to recording it 9624 or whatever. Right.
Taking it back into your DAW at that sample rate, or like people would say to me, they're summing an analog, so they're thinking about buying a quarter-inch deck or something, but the quarter-inch deck that they're purchasing is 30 years old. It's I won't mention a brand, but it was really at the time only $1,000 machine. The heads have never been relapped. Yeah. The machine has never been recapped. So you're buying an analog machine, but you're not giving it the love that it really deserves. So rather than spending the $500 or $600 on that and then the costs of tape, why not go? I think the Tascam unit, I think, is the DA3000 is their DSD recorder. Why not look at DSD as an option? And it retains all the air and all that much higher frequency response.
Right. So it just sounds less touched or something than
and it's also more malleable. Again, when we get back to that grid concept, the higher the sample rate, the more malleable something is, and that's people will listen they'll say, well, I don't really hear the difference between 96 or 44. And it's like, well, yeah, if you put up a mono vocal or a mono track and you listen to the difference of a voiceover at 44K or in mono or at 96K, yeah, you may be hard pressed to really hear the difference about it. But once you start bending it and twisting it, that's where I think it really the higher sample rates start to shine, because you've got more places within that waveform that you can change, and you without actually turning it into more of that square wave or a sine wave, And so the higher sample rates work very efficiently in mixing,
And the other thing people say about that is that even if you're processing at double sample rates, and I think this is why mastering engineers sometimes upsample as well, is to push the artifacts out of the audible spectrum as well, right?
Sure, absolutely, yeah. I mean, 96 should be a standard for everybody. Hard drives and disk space and CPU processing is just getting faster and faster. I mean, a lot of guys are still kind of using DAWs that are maybe 6 or 7 years old, so they can't really take advantage of that. And I will always default to, make your production work. Don't change your sample rate because your mastering engineer tells you to. Make sure you can fully realize your potential of your production at whatever sample rate you need to make that happen at. Because ultimately, it is about that. It's about the lyric, the melody, the production. That's what the music is about. But don't forsake higher sample rates just because you're saying you can't hear the difference. Give it a try. Try upsampling it, and even rather than even if you can't record the same performance.
Sure, and I mean, the way mathematics works in general, little things add up to big things, right? So,
well, it is. There's an accumulation of subtleties principle that happens, between everything that you're doing, being the summing, being at the the processing, the microharmonic stuff, the microdynamic stuff. That all starts to come to your favor, and as mastering engineers, we see it all the time. We'll hear masters, or people will say, I love the sound of that record, or what it is. And inevitably, it's almost always because it's at, a higher sample rate. It was a more dynamic master coming in, And when you were talking earlier about like what it was that got my ear training, it's really a shame that people are training their ears from listening to highly compressed streamed music now, or CDs. And, that's what they're thinking, that's what they should be shooting for. When in fact, what they should be shooting for is something more dynamic and something more expressive than what that final streamed format is. And that's a shame. And that's the education that we have to try to get across to people.
Yeah, definitely. And one thing I did was I went and bought literally every CD that I could get hold of on Bob Katz's Honor Roll. I don't know if you know how he put
I've heard of it. Yeah, sure.
Yeah, and immersing myself in that and listening to it on good wide range monitoring in a decent room, and I guess was part of my version of really hearing what great the potential is of a lot of that music. And
right, sure,
and other CDs as well, not just those, but the fact that he'd pointed to those that were done really well, and hearing, which one was it? It was the, I can't remember his name now. It was one of the recordings that George Massenburg had made, and I think mastered by Doug Sachs, I think it was, but
Lyle Lovett record or something?
Not Lyle Lovett. It was the other black guy with the mole on his eyebrow. Who's that? I can't think of his damn name. But it sounds. I mean, it's probably a little bit bright, and it probably could do with a little bit more warmth in the bottom end or something by today's standards. But there's a bit where he actually hits the drums, and you actually feel it move. Like you do when the dynamics haven't been flattened out, and that
right.
Stuck in my mind is hearing the drums hit you when they, feeling the speakers move, and it's like, wow, it's
well, again,
something you don't hear so much now at all.
Yeah, and that's part of this training that I think a lot of, the industry is missing. As we try to we try to tell people all the time, we'll pre-listen to mixes for people anytime. If we're involved in the mastering process or the production process, yes, send us some mixes. Let us hear them. Let us hear how much squash you have going on. Let's hear what you got going on. And ultimately, if you're going to go through the process of getting something mastered, you've got to allow some of that dynamic to be part of that process too. We'll get a lot of stuff where guys are like, listen, I can't pull my limiter off because it's just completely going to take my mix apart. And they're right, but that's because they've got that mentality of their mixing to make it sound like that already hyper compressed CD. And I really feel like that's not going to last. That's, it's a very short-lived, instantaneous kind of gratification. The records that truly we're going to want to love to listen to over the course of time are the ones that are dynamic.
I think if people eventually catch on, or once the penny's dropped that there's all those benefits and so much more excitement and musicality that's available, I think once people have that experience and they get away from the social consciousness sort of fear thing of trying to chase being as loud as someone else or being afraid that they're not as sounding like someone else, I think if we can get over that, then there's a chance of making some really exciting music, regardless of which genre as well.
Yeah.
Like even metal obviously can do with more of that individuality, more of that dynamic punch and all that.
And that's what I think what happens is, because there's more space within the dynamic and the harmonic capture, when things are more dynamic, there is more room for individuality within the band. And so you're going to find the artists that truly are individual and have a distinctive quality, they're going to want that to come through, and they're starting to bring those volume levels down. We did a record, a Havoc record for Century Media, which is incredibly dynamic, and people are loving it, that fact of it. Cool. But again, it's a decision that's made within the production team and with your mastering engineer that you discuss, what are we going for here? What is our goal?
Yeah. And what kind of music is that?
It's a metal record. Yeah, it's so
it's actually breaking a bit of the misconception that it needs to be smashed to smithereens to be as good as it is.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I mean, we're finding that overall. Again, it's a less competitive, CD kind of, smashed world. In the streaming world, the algorithms that are in place to kind of equalize out some volume levels are really allowing us to back that down and let some stuff have some air. Again, you still want it to be full, rich, thick. You want that experience of the sound to really be enveloping you, but it's not about that final, dB, half a dB. My gosh, that we were fighting for, to make people happy.
Yep, for sure. All right. Something that I was thinking of while you were talking about all of that is part of your mastering job when you're listening to what needs to be done. I'm assuming some of it is trying to make a nicer texture for the top end or the harsher part of the recording and trying to improve that texture. Would that be right?
Right. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you want to make that overall aesthetic of the sound field feel comfortable, feel inviting. There is a lot of harshness in digital. It's why we do a lot of our EQing and compression, and even limiting in the analog world. Because it just has a way. Again, there's no grid, or the grid is nearly infinite. So there's a lot of places to add additional clarity, while adding thickness at the same time. So you want to try and make that play. Like I said, it's somewhat easy. And my God, to put a multiband, however many band multiband compressor across a mix and get a generically flat frequency response. But that's not what endears people to the music. What they want is a sound that has a richness about it and a clarity that is appropriate for the song, the moment, for that matter. Even from moment to moment within a song, sometimes it shifts.
Yeah, and that's something that I feel like I hear in your masters from, I mean, obviously I haven't heard all of them, but I feel like there's always kind of this creamy sort of texture to it that makes it easy to listen to even when you crank it up. Yeah.
Yeah, well, again, I think that harkens back to that early listening experience behind the Neve console that has that, thick, rich sound.
Yeah.
And yeah, that's what, and hence I was given a great piece of advice, which I'd like to share here, which is just always trust your feelings, in this profession, because if you're then asked to do it again, what will you do? If you learn to always trust your feelings and your feelings are right, then you'll always kind of know what to do in a certain circumstance. We'll get a master that is kind of maybe bent out of shape or something, or really feeling weird. I just go for what I feel like it should sound right. And of course, I've designed my control room, my speaker system, all around, making that as, translatable as possible. You could listen to something and maybe mix something and say, well, yeah, this is exactly the way I want to hear it. But if your control room isn't translating it properly, then it's going to be wrong. So you have to work at making that environment comfortable for you so you can trust your feelings. And that's a hard thing to do, because a lot of people aren't mixing in environments that can afford that kind of luxury. So, people would much rather buy a plug-in or a piece of equipment or a new microphone than bass traps or some, diffusion or something for their room.
And actually, that's got to be another big part of why there's these sort of over-processed or strange things coming out of recordings. Is, I think, if the priority was rearranged, that someone made sure that their room and their monitoring was giving them as accurate a representation as possible of what they're hearing, and they used that as the starting point, then it would be sort of turning it around.
There are software solutions to that where but very often that's at one spot in a room, and you can kind of get that accuracy in one spot in a room, which is better than not, but that doesn't help the other listeners in the room, or if you slightly shift your ear as you're moving over to this piece of equipment or that or something. There's something nice about just standing up out of your chair and moving around and listening in the room, and maybe in another location or something.
So was your mastering room specifically designed from scratch to be a mastering room?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
Right.
And that's mostly just comes from the years of being in other rooms and poking around the back of control rooms, looking what they were doing, how they were trapping, pulling down the ceilings. When I was a younger engineer, I worked as a staff engineer at Sugar Hill Studios in Englewood, New Jersey, where a lot of hip hop and rap started. And they were Westlake designs, and it was really amazing to be rewiring these studios and pulling the ceiling grids down and seeing the trapping that was in the ceiling, seeing the trappings that were going on in the backs of the rooms and stuff, and learning wow, that's why this room sounds great, because there's all this physical stuff in here that's helping, the sound stay true.
So did you have so you would have had, I imagine, a reasonable amount of input to how your room was built?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Yeah. All my rooms, for that matter. I've pretty much designed them on my own.
Right. Oh, okay.
Based upon what I feel sounds right. There's a certain amount of, you take this from this room, you take this from that room, that I love the way that room sounds or whatever. And then, it's just physics. And then you read the books and you read but it's a lot of hard work. It doesn't come, by just putting up corner traps or something. There are real physical things within the walls that are, helping to keep resonant frequencies under control, keep, reverb time within the room under control, proper reflections, proper diffusion, But most stuff that people can find out, it just takes time. And people, like I said, probably, as I look around my room here, my room is the most expensive piece of equipment in my room. It's pricier than my speakers or the YCQs or anything, any individual piece of gear I have. My room costs more than that, any piece of gear. So
yeah, well, I think there's an obvious lesson in that. The fact that the absolute accuracy of it gives you the ability to then make your creative decisions and have confidence that
right,
what you're doing is what you want it to be, I guess.
Right. Yeah, sure, absolutely.
So
couldn't
before I
live without
forget,
that.
yeah, before I forget as well, with when you're going for trying to give a nicer texture to these masters and all of that, without giving away all your secrets, how, even like in a broad sense, do you achieve that? Like, what can you tell us about that?
Different gear has different sounds. I don't think it's really a secret at all, because people can attend a mastering session and see what happens. A massive passive EQ has a different sound than a Massenburg EQ. My Eclair Lala, optical compressor has a warm, fuzzy, approach, whereas the Pendulum 6386 has an open upper brightness presentation to it. So, very often, instead of EQing or adding bass or adding treble, we'll try, a little bit of a compressor or something to see if we can mold the sound using the gear. And I think that's what you find in a mastering room. You don't find, 3 identical EQs. You find 3 EQs that are drastically different. We've got the Weiss EQ1, the Massenburg, and the Massive Passive, as well as I have some old Langs if I want to get some real old color to something. They're noisier, and they're not as precise. But when you talk about just that global, stroke of like, oh, we just want some real thick warmth happening. Well, there you go. It comes easy from that piece. So it's not really a secret as much as it's just about having enough gear to do what you need to have done, but also limiting the amount of gear, that you have, because you don't want to spend, an hour trying different EQs, because now you've lost your perspective on it. You've got to hear something, know what you want to try and capture out of it, go to that gear, see if that's working, then start fine tuning it. You really shouldn't be spending more than 3 or 4 passes, after you kind of get the global sense of the album on a song. Otherwise, you've kind of lost that perspective. And that's the biggest part of mastering, I find, is that you want that person with that fresh perspective to say, wow, this is a really great part of this sound. Let's make sure this is coming through.
So everything you've mentioned there is all to do with analog processing, essentially.
I mentioned the Weiss EQ is a digital box.
Oh yeah.
But absolutely. And this,
but in general, it's like a lot of your tools for sweetening or for getting the texture that you want has to do with something that's contributed by the analog domain.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
Almost exclusively. The Weiss is a wonderful surgical kind of device, and we also have the TC6000, which is again a great kind of surgical box. And the TC6000 limiter is absolutely awesome. It's very transparent. You can get away with a dB or 2 without even noticing what it's doing. But then there's also, being able to take something through like, a complex limiter in the analog world, that has a completely different kind of sound, and different kind of texture, or the pendulum limiter. You have to have those options to help, because again, you want to kind of do the least amount of damage possible. So, you want to find the piece of equipment that you're patching in that's going to do the majority of the work for you, and then just add and adjust accordingly. Try to keep that signal path as short as possible, as clean as possible, just doing what you want to do. If you don't need that piece in, get it out. Get rid of it.
That's really, really interesting, because that's almost like the diametrically opposed approach that people in amateur studios or people at home think they're doing mastering by processing, like stacking one digital processor after another until they get some kind of thing that they think is a mastered result.
But again, it harkens back to that grid. I've made a big point about this lately, publicly. The grid is, digital is amazing. It's allowing people to make records that weren't able to make records. It's allowing productions to to be fully realized. I'm not anti-digital, but it has some enemy in there, and the grid is a very hard thing to ignore. And as you start putting 2 or 3 or 4 plugins on your master bus, that grid is just shrinking. It's and you're losing the depth, the air, and all of that stuff that we love about that aesthetic stuff. And that's why we use analog gear. I've been asked it constantly. We do a seminar or something, and people go like, which plugins do you love? And I'm like, not really any of them. I mean, we use a few, sure. We have things that if we need to go to them, but people are solving those problems in the mix these days more so. We're really looking to try to make that final presentation as pleasing as possible. And in some cases, obviously, with loud, aggressive music, that could be, trying to make it aggressive. How do we get more angst out of it? How do we get somebody to be more, pissed off about something, and just driving it through some tubes, getting some additional harmonic, distortion happening. Sure, that's, and a harmonic distortion in an analog sense is a lot more pleasing and a lot more forgiving than what we do in a digital world, And a lot of times it entails, EQing before the compression, then an EQing after the compression, So putting that into perspective of the order of things within the chain.
So this seems like a really obvious advertisement for anybody out there that's really serious about their mix going to reach its potential. Like, you need to use a mastering engineer who knows their shit, right?
Well, I mean, certainly, that obviously for my own purposes, I would agree with that. But it's also about a relationship. You want to, your mastering engineer is also part of your production process, and you want to have great communication with them, and you want to be able to be discussing with them, what you're going for. And I think that's why a lot of mix engineers do stick with a mastering engineer rather than floating around with different guys. It's because you develop a relationship, and you work with them, and you have, you talk about things like, remember on that last record, remember what we did on that? I'm kind of going for the same thing on this. Can we try that? And also, you become friendly with people, and you just you start to learn what they're after, and you kind of can cut to the chase a lot quicker too. But the perspective, I think, like I said earlier, the perspective is one of the main things that I think is, sorely missed if you try to master, music on your own. Is just, even when I was mixing records still, and very occasionally I will still get involved in a mixing of a record. Normally then I'll pass it off to Jamal, one of our other mastering engineers here, for him to master, because I just don't have the perspective on it. I'm not going to listen to it like, the abstract listener. I know too much about the music. I'm not going to be hearing it the same way.
A few months ago I was talking to Bob Olson, who obviously has, the most enormous amount of experience you could ask for, but he said that if he's mixing a project, he will send it to someone else for mastering still.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure. Yeah. Because it is that. It is, that's the most important thing, is that perspective. I try to listen for what's right in a mix and for what's wrong in a mix. I'm not trying to find the flaws in a mix. I'm trying to find what's attractive about it, and then I just try to make sure that that's presented as comfortably as possible. If it's a vocal presentation, you want to fill it up with sound around it. It's not just like that you concentrate on the vocal, but you look for the positive rather than the negative. And just make sure that the really good strong points are what are brought out through the mastering process.
Very interesting, and I feel like it's a good segue to go into this last section, which is you have been branching into educating people about mastering or teaching in some capacity. I don't know that much about exactly what you've been doing, but can you tell us a bit about that?
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of this stems from, a lot of experience has to get passed down somehow, mentorship, and it's sorely missed in this industry. For a long time, I was kind of against being online, discussing things or whatever, not for any kind of secretive method, but more just because you can't just read about something or hear about something. You've got to experience it. You've got to be in the room, witnessing it. And so you have to therefore, if you want better quality audio, I think Gandhi said something like, be the person you want the world to be. Well, I want better quality in the world. So we've got to train people how to recognize and deliver better quality audio. And certainly there's a lot of audio to go out into the world. So we've got to train a lot of people. So I've taken a little bit of a stance on that and tried to teach more about what it is that we do. Every individual, whether you're a producer, a mixing engineer, a mastering engineer, you're going to have your own set of aesthetics, your own set of criteria that you like. So you're going to have a style, you're going to have a distinctive quality about what you do. So I don't think that's something that you're teaching. And I think that's what people that don't want to share their knowledge, that's what they're worried about losing. But instead, if you believe in higher quality, and then if you can preach higher quality and why it works for you and how it works for you, I think people will find their own way through that. And we're going to wind up with a better industry.
Absolutely,
I've been seeing that happen, I think, in the last 4 or 5 years. I think we've seen, real mentoring happening, with elders within the industry, sharing their knowledge. Again, you're not taking some magical, frequency curve of somebody's ears and saying that's what it is. You've got to get into their head about how they learn about what they're listening to. It's not a magical balance of, put the kick drum up to minus, 12, and then bring the snare drum up so that it equals at the same level. No, you've got to feel that. There's got to be a guttural instinct on something, and that's the scary part of the internet, is that you can just read something and believe it without understanding why somebody has come up with those kind of, devices.
Oh, and there's just like an unending quantity of all that kind of thing as well. And like, this is how you master a metal song, or this is how you EQ a snare drum, or and all of that's counterproductive.
We have to get away from that, from every aspect of it. From triggering drums to everything. There was a amazingly talented engineer I've done work with. He just found one of these drum things online, and he's just thrilled. And I said to him, but don't you realize that now your drums just sound like everybody else's? Wasn't it your distinctive sound that you wanted? Isn't that what truly defines an artist and or a producer? I mean, I'm not saying don't trigger, don't sample, replace, don't reamp, whatever, but there are too many people that rely upon that to create their sound, in which case they don't really have a sound. It's a short-term moment.
I so completely agree, especially because like I'm kind of from the heavy music world. I mean, I love all the heavy music genres,
right?
But hearing all the, and this is what I was saying this to Eva the other night as well, and he was agreeing as well, that if you go back to the early 90s and you listen to all the bands that were on Roadrunner, and the band sounded different, and even the production was sometimes really quite different between each thing, and
right.
And Typo Negative come to mind. Like, there's even some of their production was a bit kooky, but it was individual, and it was different to what Machine Head sounded like, and they were different to what Deicide sounded like, and that all of that was different to what all the Swedish bands sounded like, and but now,
and that's art. That's art. Everyone needs to have a distinctive quality. That's what defines who you are. But I think it's also a sociological issue too, that bands don't know who they are, and they go to a producer and they say, "Make us sound like this other band." And they're happy using.
Yeah, there's not a question that the internet has completely just opened every door to everybody hearing and seeing everything that everyone else is doing, and sort of becoming almost peripherally aware of it, and everybody then just following each other. I mean, it's definitely because of the internet, but like I feel like every time someone posts up a metal band now and they say, "Oh, listen to this," and it could be someone that I like, it's got someone guesting a singer that I like or something, and I swear to God, there's only one kick drum sound and one snare sound now for all these bands, and I know, it's like, oh, the music wasn't even that bad, but you're hearing. It's like, guys, you really want that same thud, that same snare sound. It's not that it's the same snare hit for the whole song. It's the same for the whole album. It's the same for every band in the genre. It's like, man.
And again, it's a short-term, instantaneous gratification that the end user has. They feel identified, like, oh, that sounds like, and so therefore they're endeared to liking it. But it doesn't last. The truly, if an artist is going to survive, they have to survive on their art and their their musicality and all these lyrics and all this songwriting and arranging abilities, not on a snare drum sound, not on a kick drum sound. And the greatest records that come out don't sound like something else. They sound like something new. And you go, wow, that's new. And then normally it sticks around. And I say it to bands all the time, you list the records that you think sound awesome over the course of time. And very often, true artists identify very, very different sounding records. And I think we'll get there. I mean, just like, coming out of the 80s, drum machines, and every drummer thought they were going to be out of work, or something because it was going to be replaced by a drum machine. Keyboards, how many keyboards can you MIDI together, through the 90s, to make a new thick sound? I think we go through these stages, and we're probably at that stage now with production where, we've oversimplified the drum sound. And we've made it so that everybody has that magical drum sound. So what? There's nothing distinctive about it, and that gets back to the processing for engineers. I mean, that's a lot of the musicality, but the engineers have to start utilizing their own gear. And again, if you're using everybody's plugins and using everybody's presets, it's going to sound the same as everybody else, and it's a very short-term, success rate.
I think there's been, I absolutely couldn't agree more. And I think maybe it's partly because I come from a time. Well, I mean, I'm not that old. I'm like 30. What am I? 30? What am I? 37.
30 something.
Yeah. So all the music that I like was before all this happened. It was before essentially the internet. All the music that I really like. So to me, I notice it. I mean. Right. Otherwise, if I started listening to music in 2000 and something, maybe there wouldn't be a reference point. But it's the fact that what's happening now seems different to what's a good idea. Do you know what I mean?
Right. Absolutely. Because we've made it too easy. It's the same thing as I was saying before, where it's like, to solve a problem, people put a multiband on rather than riding the fader. Like I said, we get these hard drives from people and we look at the mixes and you hit play on them and the faders don't move. People they feel like there should be a magic place where that fader should reside for the whole song. Now, that to a certain degree, that can be true for some things, but I'm seeing it as a universal problem. People don't move faders. They don't ride automation. They'll solve their problems with compression and with multiband. Like I say, fader first, EQ second, compress third. That should be the order of how you're making your arrangements and your mixes work. And if you don't, and you just see it, people start off with a multiband, and now they've got all the graphics on these multibands or dynamic EQs, so that you can see what frequency is poking through. Yeah, but that's the fundamental. That's the tone that you want. And people are saying, oh, look at that, that 670 cycles is popping through there. Let's pop that down. That's the melody, So I think we're visual. We're being affected into this world where that should, I have a frequency analyzer of course, in a sense, in my room, but it's off until I get well into a song because I don't want to be affected by anything I'm seeing. I want to know if the bass is the highlight of. I want that bass to resonate. I have the analyzer to be sure that as my fatigue goes on through an album that I'm keeping things consistent or so. But don't master based upon a multiband or an analyzer, or don't mix according to it. Let those moments happen. And I think again I don't want to diss all of the software developers, but they're making it so easy for us not to listen. They're making it so easy to not listen that we're just visually making music, and it's not helping at all.
And I think that's it. I think it needs to be kept in perspective that we're making music. We're not audio. It's called audio engineering all the time, but really we're making music, and that is what it is. It's meant to be making music, right? So,
right. And there's great, bands will want to record on a 1/2-inch 8-track analog machine. Why? this machine sounds like crap. Why would you want to, but it's not although they may be saying that they're, loving the sonic attributes of that kind of machine or that kind of format, and that could be true. But I think ultimately it's kind of like the vinyl thing. What they're loving is that they're not being, brought down the technology road to what they're creating. They're just creating and letting it happen and using all their musicality. And this is what we've got to get back to. And again, getting back to that teaching thing, or could be called preaching in a sense, that's what we're missing. And you go back to those older records, and that's how they were made. There's so much power in the DAW systems that we have that people are not taking advantage of, and they're just searching for these easy answers. And we're making music that's trite and just too similar to other things. And that's, that may be fine for an artist just, wanting to be a hobbyist or something. But for the true artist that wants to make a difference, that doesn't cut it at all. I want to hear something different.
We could go on agreeing about this all night or day, whatever it is. But
yeah,
absolutely. And
well, you see, there's a great TED talk by Dr. Barry Schwartz about the paradox of choice, about how having too many choices disables our mental capacity. And he goes through, I won't go into it, but he goes through a whole, physical and scientific test that they had done to show that. But I think the same thing is true here. I have 3 main EQs in my room. I have 3 main compressors in my room. Now, we have other rooms here. If I wanted to try something else, I could try something else. I could go to one of the other rooms, pull it in here and say, you know what, gosh, I really think that, this piece of gear would be right for this. Okay, I can do that. But I want to limit my choices in the room so that I can listen and make those choices valid. I think when we're given too many options, like if we have, 50 different EQ choices. We've got the Neves, we got the APIs, we've got the SSL ones, we've got the Langs, we've got the Pultecs, we've got, the Massenburg. There's too many choices. And I mean, perhaps in the right sense, in the right hands, a really, talented and well-respected engineer can make those choices along the way. So, the Neve EQ, that mid-range is the right one for this. But I think it's also disabling people by just having too many choices. Amazing records were made on analog API consoles where every EQ on the board was an API. Amazing, records were made on a Neve console where every EQ on the board was a 1081. You don't have to have all these choices. And that gets back to the instrumentation in the room. How many bands record their guitars direct and then just let the producer come up with the guitar sound at the end? He's got too many sounds. How is the singer reacting to that guitar tone while he was singing? Got to get back to, having those core sounds, those that, an original distinctive quality. I reuse that phrase over and over because I really think it matters. A band has to have a distinctive quality to move forward. And I especially feel in the United States, we're at a loss at that. Ironically, I think you guys down under are doing a much better job at it than we are, quite frankly.
Yeah, right. Well, everything you're describing is pretty much exactly kind of how I feel about how I think music should be done. I mean, that's
right.
And with my own band, like that's exactly how I'm approaching what I'm doing. Mostly because, not even because of wanting to react against what's going on so much as just it's how I feel is the most real way to express myself, like to make music, to do things. It seems to be the only way, like nothing else makes sense. So,
right.
I mean, yeah.
But I think, it's not necessarily the band's fault because we're teaching them in this new digital world that, there are easy ways, there are easy processes, you can do this, you can do that. That's why, again, that mentoring and that, that communication skill within the production team, getting involved with it, producers having pre-production. How many producers these days actually have pre-production, not in a studio, but in a rehearsal space with a band? Most professional producers do. Sometimes they'll do that in a studio, but they really treat it differently. Get back to those basics about the cores of making music and trusting the people that you're working with.
Yeah, and all the work that you do before the microphones go up.
Oh yes, of course.
I mean, drums especially. I mean, Drums are like, because they're provide such a big part of the character of a recording. It's not that hard to get a beautiful sounding natural drum sound and it sound fat and have its identity being something cool. It's not like it's that hard to do, and it's really rewarding when you do that.
I'm working on a record right now that had no kick drum mic by accident.
Right.
And the engineer got very creative with the room mics and was able to just get some. But, it's got a distinctive quality. It's got its own sound by mistake, in a sense. But lo and behold, here, and the truth about it was I didn't know it until I spoke with the engineer after the fact, that wow, that's a really interesting, low end on that kick drum. And he was just like, well, let me tell you about it. For some reason, it never, he is actually the mixing engineer, the tracking engineer, just screwed up somehow and just didn't record the kick drum. And so they have a whole album without a kick drum on it. But it kind of forced the hand of having a new sounding drum kit.
What kind of music was it?
It's more of an alternative. It kind of, if he made it fit the format, it's kind of a aggressive, grungy, folk, alternative folk kind of thing, so it's got some attitude, about it, like a Lucy Dacus. I don't know if that record, if that's being played down in Australia or not, but it's kind of got some real good girthy, earthy tones about it, but it's aggressive too, and so it works. But again, like you said, there's so much potential before the microphone that people don't take advantage of, and then they wind up wanting to change it in mastering. Yeah.
Or the Frank Zappa quote, we'll fix it in the shrink wrap. Yeah.
That's great.
Yeah. Well, we're closing in on a couple of hours of discussion here, and honestly, this has been one of the best chats I've had so far on the podcast.
My pleasure.
It's been great. Totally awesome, and I really appreciate you taking the time out to share your perspective and all the absolute gold mine of experience that you've got to share. It's really awesome. Hey.
Well, you know what, Owen? I think it's part of what we need to do now. I mean, like I said, I dare to say that I'm one of the elders, but I guess I am, in a sense. And it's, what we need to teach people isn't necessarily what the magic frequency is, but what the magic to music is, and what the magic that makes people listen. After having done so many albums, and you keep hearing people constantly quote, "Wow, that's an awesome album." Like, you take a band like Converge, people, the first thing that comes to mind is an amazingly aggressive, abrasive band. But you listen to the context of all of their albums, and there's incredible dynamics and incredible musicality in there. So that's really the twist to it, is that the give and the take. That's what we've got to teach people, and we have to take it on one-on-one. And that's why I always embrace people communicating within that production team. Get in touch with people. That's why we were perhaps talking earlier off mic that I'm more than happy to pick up a phone and talk to somebody. Because it's in my best interest as well as yours. Hopefully my name is going to be associated with your record as well. So let's get in my face. Let's talk about this. Let's make this record the best that it absolutely can be.
And there's obviously massive value to starting that process of communication early on, as opposed to the scenario of paying $5,000 to send your album for mastering to someone that you never speak to, and then they just do whatever they do to it.
Well, no one should be spending $5,000 on mastering these days. But that's wow. I don't think. Well, maybe on a box set or two, I've done that, but yeah, I think that's the other thing, is that professional mastering can be very affordable as well, without getting into specifics in terms of the overall production, and we have ways to keep that under control for people. You got to talk to your mastering engineer and say, hey, listen, here's what our budget is. What can we do? Can we make a way that we can get this done this way, a little more affordably? Okay, well, how many formats are you looking at? What are you doing? How much of this editing can you do on your own? What are the scenarios? So
I think it's great that you.
Listen.
I think it's great that you go so far to make yourself accessible and to want to be part of that and trying to sort of meet bands halfway through. I mean, halfway.
I want to meet them. I want to meet them all the way. It's again, you learn as a mastering engineer, as a mixing engineer, as a producer. You find those records. Listen, the first Converge's Jane Doe record.
Yeah.
That was a long mastering session. That was I think it was. I mean, an average mastering session is maybe 5 hours for an LP, something like that. Could be 4, could be 6, something like that.
Yeah.
I think Jane Doe may have taken 14 hours.
So why did it take so long?
Well, I mean, it wasn't like 14 hours straight per se, but we were going for something very specific. I mean, and again, you go back on that record there, that wasn't where you could just smash things into an L2, and that was actually off of analog tape. Matthew Eller mixed that record with Kurt, and Jake and Kurt were in the room. I think Nate might have been there too. I forget. And they were going after a very, very specific sound, and it took a while for us to kind of nail into. Again, mostly, matter of fact, most of that album is analog mastering. That was nearly 20 years ago, maybe 17 years ago, something like that. So there was no multi-band compression. There was no magic digital box that could give you an extra 2 or 3 dB of gain. That was just overstacking analog gear, pushing it through tubes, seeing where it was saturating, seeing where it wasn't saturating. I digress a little, but the point being that certainly there are ways within the budgets to save and also to kick ass. You got to kick ass, folks. I mean, I don't know. It's not worth doing unless you're going to kick ass. So,
amen. So, while we're on that point of all these processors and bits and pieces of awesome gear that you obviously have, is there like some sort of unicorn processor or like some piece that you would just love to get your hands on one day that you don't have yet?
No. And I say that because music is individual. And there's no one piece of gear that works on anything. And I find that all the time. Like I'll listen to a piece of music and I'll be like, oh, let's go right to the Pendulum 6386, vari-mu compression for this. This is going to be perfect, And I'll patch it in and I'll be like, wow, it's not really working. Should I try the optical? And you try it and you go, wow, that just came to, you just don't know. You got to let it and you got to push it and you got to pull it. That's the other thing. People try presets. It's not about a preset. A lot of times, like I said, we'll pre-emphasis and de-emphasis through a processor, through an EQ, through a compressor. So you'll push 3K into the compressor so that that gets a little bit more aggressive through the tube stage or through the transformers, and then on the other side of the compressor, back it down. So you can't just pop a piece of gear in and just say, is this working or not? You got to play it a bit. You got to give it a chance and try some things with it, and that comes with experience certainly, but that's part of the fun of the gear, and that's what keeps it original. And that's why there's no one box, that I have that I couldn't live without or that I would desire or lust to have,
So there is no extra EQ that you would buy if you could get your hands on it or anything like that?
No, and I think also it harkens back to that originality and distinctive quality. I think if you had every EQ, where is your individuality coming from?
True. Yeah.
I mean, I have 3 different main kinds of, analog EQ. And if I can't make one of those 3 work, then it's probably just not there. Yeah, maybe there is one that might be a little bit finer, but I don't know that the time that it would take to go through 3 or 4 different EQs is actually going to keep my perspective on what I'm supposed to be doing. So I keep the amount of gear in the room limited to what I know I need to get the job done.
Sure.
And that changes, not a lot, but over time, there is a new piece of gear that enters into the room, and sometimes it'll leave, and sometimes it'll stay, or sometimes I'll, gosh, I really love that Compex limiter, and it's a very, very aggressive, compressor, but for in the right circumstance, it's right, and sometimes it's in the room, sometimes it's out of the room, and I don't have 9 racks filled with equipment in this room. There's really 3 racks, and that's it,
Yep. So if somebody wants to get in touch with you for mastering, what's the best way for them to get in touch?
I guess through our website, westwestsidemusic.com. It's probably some Facebook things. I don't really I'm trying to get better on the social media, but I quite frankly don't have the time. It's pretty easy to Google us or something and find either Alan Douches or West Side Music and find us. I don't think that's a problem these days for people to locate us. Drop us an email, drop me a text, drop me a phone. People have my phone number. Like I say, when I'm working in a session, my assistant has my phone. So there's a good chance you'll talk to them. But I take my phone home with me on my ride home. I'm talking to people. So communication is key, and that's not just for me. Everybody should. A band with their producer, with their engineer, with their mixing engineer should be in touch. Keep that communication going. Keep talking. It's good relationship advice as well.
Absolutely, yeah. And so, have you got any projects coming up that you're looking forward to? Anything cool coming up?
The new Converge record. We're working on that right now. That's pretty awesome. I think that's gonna surprise a lot of people. The beautiful thing is there's always something. That's when you asked me earlier about, did I want to be? I didn't want to be a mastering engineer, but one of the things that I really enjoy about it is that there's always something new and exciting coming around. You never know. People email us and say, hey, would it be possible for you to master our record? And I'm like, of course. They're like, even if it's an unknown band, I think they get the feeling like that I don't want to work with an unknown or something like. And I'm like, no, those are the most interesting projects out there, and that's the gems, finding them. I mean, there are so many of them. I can't even. One of the things I think we're Jamal, my other engineer, and myself, what we want to do is we want to kind of form almost like an A&R department, and say, man, check this band out, because this is awesome, and again, it's just because we get a lot of material and we get some really obscure stuff that is just fantastic and you just love it, and then there's, there's the trite stuff, but we still obviously put as much effort into it as possible, but, I love finding new bands. I just, a new band comes in and it's just got something new. I was talking to this one band, that I guess I've probably been through 3 or 4 conversations with them on how to adjust their mix. And again, they haven't finalized their mixes. They're just sending me MP3s. And I'm just making comments back to them. Simple concepts. I'm not telling them, amount of reverb on the snare drum or something, but it's kind of like a ska band, and they really had the horns all in the center with the tight ball with the bass and the guitar and everything. It wasn't really spread out wide. Then they spread it too wide, and we just helping them find their way through it all the time, not making it my record, but helping them realize their record that they want, and often discussing other records along the way, And I find it fresh for me too. That's one of the things that keeps me, my attitude, strong about working with, every new band that I work with, which is normally something close to twice a day, to a certain degree. It's normally an LP and maybe a single or an EP or 2 EPs or something, every day. It's just like there's always going to be something new, and I'm always, when I hear that first record, I'll make a comment to a band like, "Wow, guys, why is this song number 9? Get this one up front." Really?
You like that? It's like, and it's the oldest song that they've recorded, and it's like, oh, we've been playing that song for 25 years. I'm like, guys, it's a great song. Put it up, So we do get a little involved in that, but never to the point where it's like, we're right and they're not. As a matter of fact, there was a great example of a Jets to Brazil, an album on J Tree, where Blake, the singer, started the album off with I think it was a 7-minute song, and I remember turning around to him and saying, "Really? You're starting the album with a 7-minute song?" And Blake, having come from, a punk background, was just like, "Yeah, screw him." And I was like, right on, good. That's the answer. If it's a pop record and you're starting with a 7-minute song, it's a wrong answer. So, as the mastering engineer, you have to be able to discern, why is somebody doing this, and embracing their originality and their distinctive qualities.
Yeah, well, it shows you've just got like a unquenchable passion for music, basically. I think
you have to, right, in this business. I mean, if you don't, why are you doing it? It's certainly the golden. I as well missed out on the golden, money years, so to speak, or whatever. And I certainly make a nice living, but working in the indie world, if you don't love this with a passion, you know, my buddy was over. He's does a lot of TV mixing and TV mixing in New York City, and he was just saying, like, if we didn't love this, you know, we could be in, you know, Wall Street, be making a lot of money for the amount of time we put into this. You know, you've got to have a passion for it. That's what I love about it. Absolutely.
So, do you think nowadays, if you want to be a recording or a mixing guy, do you think probably the best shot, if you're really serious, is to be running it like an owner-operator, or like owning your own studio?
I think it's an inevitable first choice, but I think then you develop and you want more, and maybe the limitations of your owner-operator get in the way. And I think most producers then like going places and doing things in different places with different source engineer, you know, different source studios and different locations. I think that was something that I learned on as an early engineer, was that it was great to go to a different studio and get a different vibe and get a different attitude, and then going to a different studio and getting a different vibe and a different attitude, and then maybe you'd come back to your home base or something and try and bring some of that back to it, which is a, you know, an awesome thing to do and learn. And also, I think when you're in a different room, you tend to push the limits a little bit more. You know, you're like, well, this isn't my piece of equipment. I can push this a little harder than that, you know, and you wind up not necessarily breaking it, but making a new sound, or trying a microphone in a different location. Like, wow, that drum sound really awesome here. What did I do different, you know? So I think, owner-operator, starting out, you know, maybe in your bedroom, sure, that's going to be the way it's going to work. Then you get to the basement, and then maybe it's the garage or something. But I think you've got to also expand out and go to other studios, maybe even, you know, as a form of, you know, exercise to try things differently.
So to rejuggle that question slightly, do you think if you are going to do a lot of mixing, it's probably best to have your own mix setup that's a super, like, to build your own room that's super accurate, sort of like you would with mastering? But do you think if you're really serious about mixing, it's best to be probably mixing in your own room that you've set up and sort of in the same concept?
Especially with the, you know, what's required these days of, you know, the expediency and the total recall and all that kind of reliability. Mixing is a little more refined in that sense. Yes, absolutely. Tracking, not so. I think, you know, and also getting a band into a new location, getting them out of someplace. I think there's I know in the United States here, we have, you know, a lot of people go to destinations to do some recording, you know, signed bands, you know, the label won't want them in New York City. They'll want them in upstate New York. They'll want them in, you know, in Idaho or something where they know they're going to be focusing on their album concept. Yeah. So that works there. Mixing wise, you know, I think it's become a lot more, you know, personalized. The experience of the mixing engineer sitting there doing his thing, sending the product to the band. I don't necessarily know that that's the right choice either, that we've gotten to where there's this total recall all the time. You know, again, it gets back to that Barry Schwartz, the paradox of choice. You know, give the band too many options on fixings and revisions, and, you know, you wind up taking away them missing what the core listening should be. You know, there's a mixing engineer that I work with where, you know, he's got a price for mixing per song per album, and he gets one set of revisions. Each set of revisions beyond that, the price goes up. And so, and his point is that, you know, guys, put all your revisions down on the first sheet here. Okay, put them all down, and I'll make them all happen. Don't give me just the drummer's revisions now, and then on the next pass, give me the guitarist's revisions. Get it all together, you know. And don't even expect that. I was on the phone with somebody once, and we were giving them a little price quote, and he said, well, how many revisions do I get for that? And my response was, well, it all depends on how hard you want me to try on the first pass. You know, it's kind of like, you haven't even heard anything we've done, and you're already asking for how many revisions do you get. Now, I understand, again, it's a mentality thing, so it worked out fine, but rather than going into the expectation with the glass half empty, go into it with it half full, if not full completely. So, you know, say, gosh, we're really going to kick butt on this. Let's make this this is going to be awesome. I had a band here that mixed with, I won't mention the name, but, you know, one of the world's most renowned mixing engineers, and, you know, and they were saying, you know, could you believe he didn't even want to listen to what we had to say, you know, or something. And I was just like, You just paid this guy $30,000 to mix your record, and you want to tell him what to do? I mean, I know the mixing engineer. I'm sure it wasn't quite as, black and white as that. I think they were probably making very unreasonable requests that just didn't make sense given the circumstances of, the label paying this kind of money to this mixing engineer. He has to deliver what the label wanted. You know? But again, don't go into your sessions, don't go into your recording with, the half empty. Go into it with the half full, if not the fully full glass. Go into it with all that energy. A lot of stuff I talk about is, kind of Zen, metaphysical, or whatever. And there is a part of my life that does believe in all of that. But I think it transcends that. If you picked up and you were playing notes on Jimi Hendrix's guitar, would it sound different than, than your Stratocaster? Do you play it differently? Do you have a different sense that you bring to it at that moment? Bring that to your recording. Bring that to your performance. If you're, and that's the greatest advertisement for a recording studio, is like gathering people together in a room that are all being creative together at the same time. That's an awesome thing, rather than one person at a time.
Totally.
Feed off of that.
Yeah.
Feed off of that part that person's playing. Talk about it. Now, we're missing that. There's, obviously there's some great movies like, there's the Muscle Shoals studio, there's the Wrecking Crew movie, there's all these, where great music was made by musicians in rooms coming together, having a great time together. And that's what it should be about. It should be about having fun. And I'm having fun.
Totally. So surely a reasonable amount of your mastering jobs that you do would never get revisions, right? Like people wouldn't even want a revision.
Well, I don't want to say that I don't embrace them at all, because it's not my record. It's someone else's record. Certainly, our process is that we do a lot of communication up front. So it's not like they're blindly handing it to me and say, Alan, do what you do. I've got a lot of information ahead of time about maybe what they're going for. And a lot of that may stem from the engineer that I've done a lot of work with or something, and we have some communication. I may have heard some of the mixes along the way. So there's a lot to be said prior to me sitting down and actually mastering the record that we're probably going to come out pretty close on the other side pretty quickly, But certainly somebody may say, oh, well, you know what, that intro, we wanted it to be a little bit quieter than that. We wanted it to kind of be a whisper. Oh, okay, great. Well, then let's adjust that. We don't have a standard revisions price because we don't charge for revisions, because it should be part of the process. But I'm not going to tell somebody you get 5 sets of revisions, because that's just absurd. It's like, if it's going to take 5 sets of revisions to get the record that you need, then that's what it's going to take. But if we can get it earlier, then that's what we're going to do. And that should be the process for every mixing engineer as well, right? And, or a tracking engineer. If you're getting that track, no, sorry, you only get 1 pass on that, Mr. Drummer. That was it. No, let's go. Let's put this together and let's edit it. Let's piece it together if we have to, Yeah, the music's, the performance, the music, the presentation's got to be great. The competition is too tough. There's too much music out there. You've got to go forward with your best foot, or else you're just not. There's a good chance you're not going to succeed. So,
100%. Yep.
There you go.
Totally. All right. Well,
so, to be continued.
Indeed, absolutely. Well, down the track, once I can dredge up some more questions, I'll probably hit you up again at a later date. So,
sure. This is like, instead of me listening to preview some mixes this morning, I'm chatting with the other side of the world. It's awesome.
Totally. So, yeah. No, it's been really cool. So you're heading into doing some mastering now soon?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I've got quite a few things on my palette for today. One Australian band, the Mismade, as well as Between You and Me. They're on my list for this week. So,
yep. Okay, I haven't actually heard of them, but that doesn't mean much. There's so many bands. Yeah. I mean, yeah.
Sure, I know. That's why it's got like I said, the competition is tough. It's got to be great. So, go with your best foot forward. It's the best way to ensure what you're doing and is gonna be heard in the proper light.
Yep. Well, thanks so much again for all your time, and have a great day mastering and a great however many weeks or months ahead it is until we chat again. And
great.
Yeah, we'll
great, Owen.
All the best. We'll catch you around.
Yeah, I'll see you on the other side.
All right, no worries. Cheers, man.
All right.
All right.
Cheers. Bye.
See ya.
Bye-bye.